Welcome back to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is a talk video, and we've got ourselves the final member of the Sith Fleet. I'm getting pretty excited for this thing. The Mark 6 Interceptor kit reveal has been released. We're going to look at the developer insights, do our breakdown and analysis of the kit. We're going to look at the Datacrons that just got announced as well, and then wrap up with the free-to-play gearing of my roster. CG has brought us another Interceptor to make our lives all a little bit more confusing. The Mark 6 is another dark side Sith Empire attacker ship, this one piloted by the Sith Empire Trooper. With the attributes portion here, Annihilate on basic is the big thing, obviously. It's also going to have Devouring Swarm, which is going to work like stacks of the B1 battle droid. More stacks equals more offense and more negative effects. With the tips portion, they state clearly that it's going to be a good reinforcement, and it gets stacks from defense up and retribution. But the big thing here in the insights portion and the frequently asked questions is CG has given us the Leviathan requirements, and I don't really have too much to add here because this is kind of what I was expecting. Most of these names, if not all of them, were theorized as potential characters. I had been preparing on a number of them in advance, and the relic levels themselves don't really surprise me. We had that recent video where I talked about theorizing that I expected all requirements moving forward to jump a level because of how easy Jabba is to get, relatively speaking, the importance of the raid, and how the raid was going to be the mechanic to this next phase of the game, which was going to focus on high relics. I think I'll throw that video on at the end. But this is what I expect the future to look like. Things like this, where R5 is the new R3. And R7s, at least with Mark II tokens, not as bad as it used to be, and is pretty easy to do. I've just made some changes to my roster, and that was definitely made far easier because of the Mark II tokens. In terms of the characters, like Maul's the only one that you don't really have a use for, but maybe they'll make some changes. The Datacrons will make that a little bit easier to swallow. But all these other characters you can find some use for, and Sorty's a character I think has the potential to be further unlocked in the future with the addition of another droid or two. Now for our slightly abridged breakdown and analysis, the basic ability, Deadly Stack, physical damage to the target. Mark 6 Interceptor gains additional effects based on stacks of Devouring Swarm, and those effects are here. We're not really going to go through all of them. The only ones that, I guess we'll hit a couple of these. So below 10 stacks, you gain 10 stacks. That's going to help with the resiliency. I like that. The crit damage up, fine. At 30 stacks, applies shock. Shock's always a helpful ability. I mean, it's basically buff immunity, and that always has its place. And then if above 40 stacks, this is the big one. This is the Annihilate. That's what triggers. And then with the more stacks of Devouring Swarm, also +2 offense per stack. With the first special ability, Can't Outrun This. This is a 4-turn cooldown ability. Special damage to the target and call another ally to assist. Mark 6 Interceptor gains accuracy up and 10 speed, maxing out at 100, and 10 stacks of Devouring Swarm for the rest of the encounter. Also a mass inflict of potency down. So there's a few nice things here. The stacking speed will help make this ship more dangerous as the battle goes on. The assist call will help spread the debuffs. Either get the dagger to apply ability block, or the Fury class Interceptor to spread the debuffs on the field, or you call the bomber to get more stacks of swarm, and we'll return to that in the unique. And the additional stacks of Swarm will help get it to 40 stacks fast and help increase the offense. I expect to use this ability first turn, or the first available turn for the Interceptor, to boost the stacks and to start getting those additional effects. With the second special, Devouring Sacrifice, this is a 3-turn cooldown ability. AoE special damage, all allies gain tenacity up. If the Mark 6 Interceptor has more than 4 stacks of Devouring Swarm, there are these effects here. Lose 3 stacks of Devouring Swarm. Mark 6 gains Retribution, allies gain crit chance up, and inflict enemies with crit damage down and speed down. There's a lot of meaningful synergy here. It increases the attacks out of turn, which is going to help all the ships. It's going to add crit chance, which is going to make the dagger all the more reliable. But the Retribution is the big thing here because of the unique ability. Retribution is going to help all of the ships and help stitch their effects together. Now with the unique ability, Devastating Sensation. CG has made this difficult to read with this block of text here, but it's fairly straightforward. The first portion here at the battle start, max health set to 1, no protection, etc., etc. That's just restating some of the mechanics of how like the B1 battle droid stacks function. Just, it's not going to have health and protection, just the stacks. You take out the stacks. It will start out with 10 stacks of Devouring Swarm, can't be defeated while it has stacks of Swarm. Now when Mark 6 Interceptor takes damage, it loses 2 stacks of Devouring Swarm and it cleanses. If the Mark 6 Interceptor has no stacks of Devouring Swarm, it's immediately destroyed. When the Mark 6 Interceptor has Retribution, its attacks ignore enemy protection, which is going to keep ships below full health, just making the dagger more effective because its crit becomes reliable when the ship is not at full health, and then it's just going to help the dagger get all of those stacking effects. When Retribution expires, gain 5 stacks of Devouring Swarm, doubled if dispelled. But the big one is here, and I was kind of alluding to some of this in the other abilities. Whenever an ally gains defense up, Mark 6 Interceptor gains accuracy up, advantage, and 2 stacks of Devouring Swarm. And that's the key mechanic, because this is why Retribution from the special ability is important. Right now, the only defense up is on the B-28 bomber's basic ability, and Retribution on a tank means it'll be countering constantly, and it'll be constantly granting itself defense up, just adding stacks of Swarm very quickly. This also just reinforces my pet theory that the Raddist will be the best near-term soft counter to this fleet. We'll have to make a separate video on it now, but there's a couple things there. It's because of the dispel abilities that the Resistance X-Wing has, but it's also because of the non-attack abilities. Because not attacking this Sith fleet, not just because of this ability, but because of other mechanics on the bomber and on the TIE dagger, it's going to be so important. Now the reinforcement ability here, this is fairly straightforward, not much to add, but it is critical. Enter the battle, gain 5 stacks of Devouring Swarm for every other ally reinforced ship. That part doesn't matter. What matters here is if the capital ship is Sith Empire, if it's the Leviathan. Mark 6 Interceptor gains 30 stacks of Devouring Swarm instead for every other ally reinforced ship, and it will also gain a stack of ferocity. So yeah, this is what the Leviathan is all about. Bring it in as a reinforcement. Right away you get Annihilate when you do that. Leviathan is going to be intense, and because it's being brought in as a reinforcement, it's essentially having an Annihilate on cooldown. It's really a basic Annihilate in name only. The question though is going to be, when do you bring this ship out? Now you're going to bring the Sith Fighter out as the first reinforcement because the stack effect is only for every other ally, so there has to be an ally out there already. The Sith Fighter is going to work great in that capacity, but then do you bring it out as the second or the third? And that's only going to depend on the details of how fast this fleet is. If it's fast enough, maybe it's okay to justify waiting a little bit longer, allowing the stacking effects of all that offense from like the dagger to start increasing. But we're going to need to play with the fleet to understand it a little bit at that point, because when you bring it in as a reinforcement, after you use that basic annihilate ability, it's going to be pretty easy to take out. You're going to come in, you're going to have those 40 stacks, and you're going to lose 40 stacks. So you're basically going to lose it right away, or you're going to bring it in, use that special to start so that you bring yourself up from 40 to 50 stacks, and then use the basic ability. But there's also the potential of waiting for even longer, coming into the battle with 60 stacks, and then you're going to have a pretty resilient ship that may even have an opportunity to get a second annihilate off, depending on how quickly the battle goes. The problem is most battles don't really go that long, and one annihilate is usually sufficient, because you just need to take out like the Houndstooth, take out the Outrider, and you're basically done. Or you get through some tanks so you can focus on the ships that you want to and make some quick work thereafter. I want to quickly touch on the Datacrons. This set is a bit underwhelming after several sets in a row that had some very high performing must-have Datacrons like the Trench, Afra, or Grand Inquisitor Crons. There's a lot more here with questions, but even though I don't think there's no-brainers, there's plenty of good ones, particularly in the Sith set, where I think 3 Sith teams can be boosted or built. And what is nice is we won't be going out of our way for most of those, because we are also going after the Leviathan, and that doubling up of work is going to make things a little bit easier. And actually, let's just jump straight to the character portion here. So what I want to cover, the Sith Empire Trooper Datacrons, that's very solid. It's going to make a nice boost to a Melga squad, make that much more dangerous, especially with all the other investment going on in that squad. The Darth Talon one is another one I really like, because she can become very dangerous with Loyal Hand, particularly if you do have the Omicron. It's an Omicron that I am considering these days because of how well it works with Traya and how good Traya has become. I've gone up against one recently, and I was very impressed by how quickly she became dangerous. This is just going to intensify all of those mechanics. And now there's a couple other ones here that I kind of like. Savage, I like a lot. You can use that in a solo effect, but there's going to be a little bit of trade-off, because when he does damage to an enemy, he's going to be removing that turn meter, but that also means he's going to be attacked a little bit less, and he gets a lot of turns from how that reinforced whatever works. So is there going to be a give and take there, a little push and pull that is going to make that less of an impressive Datacron? There's that question I have. But I also like the Sith Trooper one and the Darth Maul. Now for SLKR players, they have nice first order squads that they can apply this Sith Trooper Datacron to, get a nice little boost. For other players like me who don't have SLKR, then there's a little push and pull. We got to decide which of these other Crons are going to have the biggest effect. I like the Sith Trooper one. I also kind of like the Maul one. There is some ability to make a third Sith squad out of all of these characters that we're going to be relicking up. You could even have a nice squad with Maul, Sith Trooper, Savage. That would actually be pretty effective in a 3v3 capacity. Bastila Shan is the next one that I think is a really solid one. This is the one I think most people are going to go after. You use it with a Jedi squad, use it under JML or Jedi Knight Revan, or you could potentially use it under Karth. It's going to be boosted up with any Old Republic characters. I might even add relics to my Juhani. Actually, I probably will add relics to my Juhani to get a little bit more utility out of this with that extra turn meter, extra protection up. But it's also going to be helping the raid, and Juhani has a nice Omicron for territory wars. These other Old Republic characters, though, they're a little out of reach for me. If you already have them, if there's some nice ones, like I'd love Mission Zelbar paired with a Tarful, but none of those characters are going to be relic for me within this time frame. Same thing with Night Sisters. If you have relic Night Sisters, there's some nice ones here. I'd go after the Marin one. I'd go after the Asajj one. The Asajj one I may still go after, though, because of some fringe usage. Because one of the things that happens after a good Datacron expires is sometimes you can find an interim Datacron to help give some minimal boosts to the next squad. And that can be done here with Asajj and with Trench, because Trench has a great Datacron right now, but that's going to expire, and when it expires, we could potentially slot in Ventress with these extra stats to make Trench a little bit more dangerous and have an interim crown until we see what's coming in the future. This was similar to what happened with Afra. Afra had that cheat code of a Datacron, and then in that next set of that droid Datacron set, you could throw in a target lock Datacron onto Afra and boost her up to a pretty solid degree, and we're going to have a lesser version of that here with Asajj. Just you boost up one character, but that one character might be helpful on that squad. The other things here with these other abilities, we're not going to go into detail here, but there's a lot of nice level 3 abilities here. Like, I would go for, I think the start of the encounter, gain 15% max health and max protection. You should get a ton of those to throw on to everybody. That is going to be useful everywhere. The stun or daze one is also very good, but that's going to be more conditional based on the squad. Might be very solid with like a Star Killer, might be solid with Dash or some of these other squads. The evasion ones has some fringe usage as well, just depending on the team. That could be solid with some Inquisitors, teams that throw around the Foresight. That is all effective. And then with these faction ones, these has some of the same potential. Like, you could also use like Sith, make Dooku a little bit better for a Trench squad, or any of these other teams that have a little bit more mix and match. We can look here and for some of these abilities here to boost up some characters. What I do like for like the Sith or for the Old Republic, there's 3 that are really nice here. Obviously, the whenever an enemy is defeated by an enemy, that enemy can't be revived. That can be very helpful around the right squads. Other ones are the offensive stacking, and then I really like the first time each Sith ally is reduced below 50% health, they inflict doubt on all enemies. And the Retribution one is also going to be very effective. There's some nice ones here. With the Old Republic and the Night Sisters, there's a few good ones here, and it's just going to come down to which ones we want to prioritize. Whenever an Old Republic ally defeats an enemy, refresh cooldowns. That's going to be huge. That just means utilizing Marked way more often. It means using Bastila Shan's assist call and buffs way more often. That's going to be huge. Grant a buff to another ally. That ally gains 10% turn meter. That could be very effective with Bastila Shan. And then whenever allies are revived, they gain protection over time and reduce their cooldowns. Obviously with Jolie, that's going to be very effective as well. And with Night Sisters, it's no question. It's just whenever a Night Sister ally is defeated or revived, inflict 2 stacks of plague on all enemies. That's going to be amazing with Marin. We wrap up with the free-to-play gearing of my roster. This is the gearing from May 1st. This was just prior, I think, to the final week of 3v3 is what was going on at the time. So Warrior, we take up to 7 stars, very fast farm. Really happy with her as a character. Really effective at Gear 11 even. And has been great help in Conquest and in the Raid. Now Tarful here. This was just after Tarful got released. So taking Tarful up to Gear 11 right away as I do. And I like to just try and figure out if there is any lower gear, lower star viability on all these characters. Like we found plenty with Sir Junda. With Tarful, not as much, although he can beat weaker teams. It's just we don't see that many weaker teams these days, so that's not really a gamble worth taking. Although he's shown a lot of promise, where it's very clear he's going to be good with a relic squad that can survive long enough for the stat stacking to come into play. They'll throw in all those Omegas and Zetas. Very happy with him as a character, though. Just untapped potential at this stage. Now, Admiral Trench is the next one. And this is why I know this was at the 3v3 season, because I was using Trench in that final week and got a number of holds. And I used a Dooku on that squad. Dooku and Watt. And that made all the difference. And held up to Wampas, whereas the Jango versions would get Wampa'd. And I countered it with Wampas. And the Datacron must have been around at that stage. Because why would I have done this? It just feels a tad early. Oh, I guess it was the second... Yeah, we're in like the second month of this Datacron then. Okay. Something like that. Yeah, we just got a new set, of course, yeah. Anyway. Now, Grief Karga here, just adding some resources to make him a little bit more effective. I'm not ready to take him up to relics because I was anticipating the Leviathan and didn't want to... And I'm working towards GLs, so did not want to add resources to him that should be allocated elsewhere. Rex, though, making some incremental improvements. Also because of Lord Vader, that's another character that I'm not directly working towards, but incrementally working towards. And Dooku is the same deal. This is when I take Dooku up to Relic 5 for the Datacron. So that is exactly what I was doing. And that's starting to make sense to me. And you will see me use that in this next 3v3 season. That Jango should not be on the 3v3 team is what I'm concluding. This, I believe, was also the final week we had before the raid. So you're going to start seeing some very rapid changes to my overall roster once the raid becomes active. And once I made the determination that I was happy with everything and that the economy had changed. This is when I start unleashing things and start pretty radically changing my roster that had been largely Gear 11. This allows me to, that is that staging ground that I had established. The raid allowed me to just unlock all that and just juice everything up to Gear 12 for very little effort. And we'll wrap it up there. There's a bunch of smaller videos that I'm going to try and put out soon. I have a bunch of little things and ideas, and maybe we'll tack on gearing onto those videos because I got a little bit of a backlog that I'd still like to get out. We're getting caught up, but just getting caught up at a rate that I'd like. At a rate I'm not satisfied with. But thank you for watching. Be safe out there, everyone. Be excellent to each other. This is still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.